Hey everyone, Andre here with a quick casual update / little chat with you all about the Nintendo 64 and Sega Genesis controllers hitting the Nintendo Switch Online service as part of the expansion pack that adds Nintendo 64 and Sega Genesis games for members who subscribe to that tier. Woo, that was a lot to get through. Anyways, as you probably saw in the Nintendo Direct, which offered a pretty good view of these controllers like you're looking at here, these cost $50 each and require Nintendo Switch Online membership in order to even buy in the first place. Now that price might sound a little bit steep, but can you really put a price on perfection? Well, I guess they just did. Point is though, these controllers are pretty much perfect replicas of the originals that came with their respective systems. But I noticed something while going through the press kit images that offered a better look at these controllers, in that they actually offer a different view of them than we saw in the Direct, showcasing a few new features, some of which make perfect sense given the fact these are wireless controllers, but I thought it'd be fun to go over them with you entirely, so that way we can better understand what you're getting when you pay for these controllers, and what that might actually mean, because there's a few other interesting features going on here. Okay, first up, with the Sega Genesis controller, we can see that looking at the top of it, we have a charging port, of course, which you'll need in order to connect it to your Switch dock to charge it and sync it, or possibly sync it at least, an easy way to sync it. We also have a snapshot button, as well as a home button. Now all of those are actually also on the 64 controller, as you can see here. There's a snapshot button, there's the home button, and then there's the charging port as well. Now in case you're wondering what that little dot is next to the charging port on both of them, well, that's just a charging light. It's just telling you when it's plugged in. So that makes sense, and so far this maintains compatibility, you know, with all the main features you need of the Nintendo Switch, which is pretty useful regardless of which controller you're using. Now, in addition though, you may have noticed another button on the 64 that isn't on Genesis, or isn't on, or wasn't on the original controller at all, being the addition of a ZR button. That's right, you now have access to a brand new button that wasn't there before that can presumably be used for primary inputs, which is awesome. That means this should be compatible across an even larger variety of games than it may have been already, and I love that. The fact that they're adding an additional shoulder button essentially, so you can now use it, you know, in even more cases, especially given the fact that 64 has a ton of buttons already. I think, is it 12 buttons? I think you have the 6 buttons on over here, the 6 face buttons, you have the 2 shoulders, you have the Z button, you have the D-pad, if you count those as individual buttons, and the start button as well. I can't do math, but now you add all that, and you have the Z button on top of it. That opens up a lot of possibilities, both for existing games, depending on how you remap them, or even upcoming games that indies could take advantage of. They can make a game specifically for the 64 controller, and I love that. That is so freaking cool. Now, besides this though, we'll get back to some of this in a moment. You may be wondering, wait a second, what's going on here? And this is the fact that we have a sync button here as well, and also the 4 controller slot lights to indicate which controller you are, because of course 64 is a big multiplayer machine, and you can connect 4 controllers to it. So this, kind of like the Wii Remote, will light up to indicate whether you're player 1, player 2, player 3, or player 4. Now, the reason for my odd segue a few moments ago about, hey, wait a minute, is because these don't seem to be on the Sega Genesis controller. There's nothing up here until I went to another press kit image, which we can see the bottom of it, and there we go. We get the sync button right there along with the 4 lights as well. So you can see how they light up, just like the 64 will over here, presumably. So yeah, that's kind of nice that both of them have the same basic functionality, except of course 64 also now adds a ZR button, which is super nice. Now to go back to the Genesis for a moment, there is something else you might have noticed, being the mode button here. Now I'm no Genesis expert, but to my knowledge, this technically isn't new, because this was found on at least the 6 button controllers that were later added into the Genesis in order to toggle between the 6 button and 3 button mode. Now for whatever reason, Sega loves to give American gamers the 3 button controller instead of the updated 6 button controller, which Japan is actually getting as part of the Nintendo Switch Online service. But in any case, we still have the same mode button here, I guess because it still serves a purpose for changing functionality in games, or for compatibility rather. I don't fully understand it myself, but that is why I think that button is here, simply because the 6 button one also has it and is used to toggle between modes in games that support the 6 button controller. So yes, nothing new. It's been there, you know, for a while. It may be new to the 3 button one, but otherwise it's really technically not new. However, now there is one other interesting connection or thing I noticed this morning, which you may have saw if I posted on Twitter, and that's the fact that a lot of people in the States, as I mentioned, are upset that we're not getting the superior 6-button layout, because it is just objectively better. You have more buttons, it works with more games. Why we're not getting it, again, is baffling to me. However, it occurred to me that we technically are getting a controller pretty much perfect for this, being the 64. That's right, you have a perfect 6-button layout right here on the right, which should make it perfectly compatible with the Sega Genesis games. There's no reason why it shouldn't be. So yeah, really between the two, it seems like the 64 is a controller to get. You got the D-pad, the 6 buttons. That's really all you need for perfect Genesis compatibility. Now the button layout isn't exactly the same, of course, but it should be close enough that you can replicate the 3-button, playstyle with these 3 right here, and then 6 buttons with all 6, of course. So I thought that was just pretty neat that if you pick up a 64 controller, you're getting a multi-use controller that works with 64, Sega Genesis, and who knows whatever else, with however many buttons are supported, thanks to the 64's unique layout, including, its 3-handed grip. So, I just kind of love that. Now, the only thing you're really losing on the 64 controller, well, 2 things. One, of course, is you can't click in the stick as far as we know, so you don't have access to any click functionality. And you also have, speaking of sticks, you don't have a right stick here, so you're losing the right stick and the click buttons. But other than that, this should be able to be used across, as I said, quite a few games. And I'm excited to see what games it may work with, like, say, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, where you don't need the right stick, technically. Or, maybe the new Kirby game, where there doesn't seem to be camera controls. Like, the sky is the limit. Maybe even Mario Tennis, so you can replicate, again, the classic 64 feel. It just seems like it's going to be a really cool controller, and I can't wait. And it's awesome to see them adding new features to them, including, again, a ZR button on the 64, which I never expected. Now, before we fully wrap it up here, there is one other thing to address, and that is, we can see they even seem to have retained, to some degree, the memory card slot on the 64, where you could also add the expansion pack, or I'm sorry, not the expansion pack, but the Rumble Pack as well. Now, I'm almost certain that it's not going to have any actual functionality. I don't think you can plug anything in. I think some outlets have asked Nintendo, they haven't responded yet. So maybe there's a chance we'll get some additional compatibility. We actually don't even know if this controller could rumble at all, which was a pretty big deal on the original system. So it would be a shame if there's no way to replicate it here, because the 64 is what brought that feature to home consoles. So I'm really hoping that they do have some kind of integration here if it's not already built in. Again, I kind of doubt this does anything, but we don't have a view of the back controller, so we can't say for sure. Finally, the only other thing I noticed is that I never really paid attention to these little slots right here. Sure enough, they're there on the original 64 as well. I have no idea what they're for. I thought maybe to tie like a wrist strap to or something, but I don't think you actually put anything into them. So I don't know what they're for. You know what? I think I know now. I think it was for some accessories that you could put on top, like the microphone, perhaps, or Hey You Pikachu. So maybe they're there for added expansion still, maybe? I doubt it. I'm just throwing it out there, but that just goes to show how true to the original 64 controller that this is, even when it comes to like these antiquated features that we don't really need. But in any case, these controllers are awesome, and I'm especially a huge fan of the C buttons in general. I thought they were brilliant. I wish, in fact, that they had used naming terminology for the face buttons on the Joy-Con, so you could use them regardless of the orientation, so you always knew which button was what, because the arrows are relative to however you're holding it. So yeah, or absolute, I guess. I don't know. In any case, I'm rambling at this point. I just want to show off these controllers because I thought they're cool, and I can't wait to get my hands on with them themselves. So there you have it, everyone. A better look at the 64 and Sega Genesis controllers, as well as their additional features and buttons, including, again, the bottom of the Sega Genesis controller, which I just think is really neat. I do have to say, to the Genesis credit, I think these buttons are, I do love how just pressable these buttons look. So, yeah, there you have it, everyone. Thanks for watching. Let us know what your thoughts on all of this are in the comments below. Are you going to pick them up, you think? We'd love to hear whether you are or not by, again, posting in the comments. So thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Bye, everyone.